The Linux Action Show is created by Jupiter Broadcasting. It's sponsored by Ting. Go to last.ting.com to save off your first device or plan, and DigitalOcean. Go over to DigitalOcean.com and use our promo code LASTDigital, and then you can spin up your own Linux rig for free. Welcome to the Linux Action Show, episode 382. My name is Chris.
And my name is Noah.
Hey there, Noah.
We're in the same room again. This is really exciting.
Only this time I came to your pad.
Yeah.
That's nice. We're here in Grand Forks in Noah's studio, where he actually does legitimate radio broadcasting too. So we're big time here, and Noah's got us all set up on the big show. Coming up on this week's episode of the Linux Action Show, we're actually going to go through Noah's home automation setup. What works, what doesn't work, what hard-learned lessons that he's paid for out of his own pocket. And then we're going to discuss the practical aspect of it, where Linux has a role and open source and where it doesn't in that setup, and all of the different hardware and sort of features that you might want to look out for. Essentially, you know, a lot of houses are going this direction in the near future, and there'll probably be completely commercial systems that come pre-installed in a lot of homes. There's already some of that happening today. However, a lot of us already have a place, or a lot of us want to roll our own solution. And that's what we're going to talk about on this week's episode of the Linux Action Show. Plus, in the news segment, yeah, you've probably been watching the news this week. Gnome 3.18 was released. Qualcomm's got an interesting, snappy running drone, and Valve hits another major landmark. We'll be talking about that. Plus, Windows could be outing your parents. There's another reason to switch your parents to Linux. And then we have some great feedback, some road trip follow-up. But before all of that, Noah, do you know what we got?
We got the picks.
We got the picks. I love this, and it fits right in with the theme of today's episode. This Z-Wave home automation hub runs Linux on a Raspberry Pi. Z-Wave Europe and Pop & Co. have launched a Pop Hub and home automation gateway that runs Linux on a Raspberry Pi and supports the Z-Wave and IP Smart devices. The Pop Hub's underlying Raspberry Pi 2 SBC runs the Z-Wave middleware, which Z-Wave Europe says is the first Z-Wave controller certified for the new Z-Wave Plus standard. Do you know about Z-Wave Plus there, Noah?
I'm familiar with Z-Wave Plus, and I'm familiar with the tie-in with Z-Wave over Bluetooth and the tie-in with Z-Wave over network.
Ooh, maybe we'll be talking about that a little more. So Pop Hub, P-O-P-P Hub, so I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it, supports Z-Wave wireless-enabled devices from more than 300 different manufacturers. You got HVAC systems, security, lighting, alarms, and windows and blinds, remote-controlled alarms. All that can be controlled with this unit. And you can control up to 230 individual devices, and it's just tiny, Noah. It's the size of a Raspberry Pi with a case over it. Also, the app will notify you when any alarms go off, and here's the deets. The Pop Hub runs Linux-based firmware on an embedded Raspberry Pi, which packs a quad-core 900 MHz Cortex A7 and 1 GB of RAM, as probably many of you know. Now, there's a couple other interesting bits of details about the Linux itself it runs. I'm going to tell you about that in just a second, but there was also a Indiegogo that launched this week. I don't know if you saw this, Noah, but there's another home automation project that's using Ubuntu Snappy. Now, the thing that's really fascinating about this Z-Wave controller we're talking about right here for the picks is it also runs Ubuntu Snappy, and I think that's particularly interesting. Is you're gonna have these different machines running, and we're gonna talk more about drones in the future. And I think this Z-Wave one in particular is not exactly like I don't quite understand, but it's not like full-fledged Ubuntu Snappy. Like they're not taking advantage of the transactional aspect of Ubuntu. That's like their own custom. I'm going to read more into that because I don't quite understand that aspect of it. But these types of devices, Noah, getting smaller and smaller, now the size of a Raspberry Pi. Would you run your home automation off something like this?
Absolutely. Here's the thing. I approach my home automation to a couple of things. Unlike my computer, where I can put up with a couple little hiccups here and there. When it comes to my appliances at my house, when I walk into the bathroom and I want to use the bathroom and I hit the lights, the lights have to come on every time with zero equivocations. And so if I can do that with a standard that runs on open source hardware or a combination of open source hardware and software, absolutely, I'd love to do that.
You know what I like too about the Raspberry Pi in there is I would think. I don't know for sure, but I would think that if you have a hardware failure, a year or two down the road, instead of having to rip out the whole piece of hardware and replace the whole infrastructure, you could just pull out the SD card, which you're probably going to have a backup of too, and get a new Raspberry Pi, install it in the box yourself, and then just pop the SD card back in.
Actually, I guess what I would actually do is I would DD that SD card once I had everything configured, and then
Definitely.
And then anytime I had to restore it or something like that, I would just put a blank SD card, DD the image back on there, and stick it back in.
Yeah,
Maybe even periodically, if I make changes or something, re-DD it.
That's kind of a nice way to back up your home automation system, actually. You know what else you could do, Noah? You could store those images on a DigitalOcean droplet. Maybe you're having all your backups go there. DigitalOcean.com is the sponsor of the Linux Action Show. Go over to DigitalOcean.com and use our promo code LASTDigital. Why? DigitalOcean has an entire infrastructure built on top of Linux using the KVM virtualizer, all running on top of SSD drives. You can get started in less than 55 seconds, and pricing plans start only $5 a month. That'll get you 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, 1 CPU, and a terabyte of transfer. That's nuts. And if you use our promo code LASTDigital, guess what? $10 credit. $10 credit means $5 rig, 2 months for free. You put some OwnCloud on there, you put some GitLab on there, some WordPress, some Ghost. I don't care. Shoot. You could even put BitTorrent sync up there, a sync thing. You do it over at DigitalOcean.com. You use that promo code LASTDigital. You support this show. You keep us on the air. And you get yourself an awesome rig up in the cloud. DigitalOcean has an amazing interface. It's very simple, very straightforward, and they have a great API that you can either take advantage of with a bunch of good open source apps already, or write your own, or just write something internally and just snap it into your own infrastructure. And I want you to check them out too, because they've just launched a brand new data center. Now, they got data centers all over the world, in Germany, London, San Francisco, New York, Singapore, but I want you to check out the brand new one in Canada, because check out this name, Noah. They're calling the Canadian data center in Toronto Tor 1.
That's awesome.
Yes.
That's awesome. You know, I was having a conversation after Linux Unplugged last week with a couple of guys, and they said, you know, you say that you can get a $5 droplet for 2 months for free, but you can't really do anything with the $5 droplet. I just looked. 9 of my droplets are $5 droplets, and I'm doing lots of stuff. I have an airtime server that's running on a $5 droplet. I have an EMR hosted for somebody that's trying it, that's running on a $5 droplet. I have a Mumble server that's running on a $5 droplet. I have an IRC, my Quassel core is running on a $5 droplet. I have tons of stuff. The JBFTP server is running on a $5 droplet.
I think our virtual lug Mumble server runs on a $5 droplet. I'm not sure. It might be a $10, but it's right in that really reasonable price range.
Point is, there are tons of stuff that you can do with just a $5 droplet, and if you think for 1 second that it's you know, that
well, if you don't, then you don't really know how Linux works, because the nice advantage of Linux servers, and this is why Linux is so dominant in the server space, is the mad amount of things you can get done in like a really reasonable amount of resources. And the other thing that's super brilliant about that, is why we love Linux, is when you add more horsepower to it, it all just scales up brilliantly. You know, it can go from a watch to a supercomputer.
Yeah.
So you try the promo code LASTDigital, try it for free for a couple of months, support this show, and also really, it is a lot of fun to play with these systems. If you enjoy tinkering with your computer, then it is a rush to mess with a system that is on a super fast connection, that has all SSD drives. I mean, it is just the greatest.
And I was talking to a gentleman the other day that was talking about he was looking at certification, and you can rent labs, right? It's actually cheaper to go rent 2 or 3.
Well, you can do hourly even at DigitalOcean.
Right. And then you can set it up with their local LAN, so you can simulate having production servers on a LAN. And
the private network is perfect for that. It's
really
perfect for that, yeah. And they have a ton of good community-written tutorials that all have been edited by their professional editors, vetted and all that stuff. So it's some of the best documentation on the web to take your droplet even further. DigitalOcean.com, and use that promo code LASTDigital. And a big thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the Linux Action Show. I have so much love and respect for that company, because they have made my life so much easier. And the fact that it's all running on top of Linux is totes amazing. Speaking of something that's totes amazing, I just said it twice. I cannot believe we have never talked about AvidMux or AvidMux. I'm not quite sure how you say it.
I'm going to go with AvidMux.
It's AVIDEMUX. And it is... I cannot believe we've never covered this, because it is such a critical tool to my daily production workflow that it is one of the most self-serving app picks I've ever done, and yet I've never mentioned it. I checked the last picks site on JupiterBroadcasting.com.
He didn't believe it. Like he looked like 2 or 3 times. He's like, well, maybe there's a mistake.
I did the whole site search and everything. Like, didn't I? Like,
He's like, well, how do we spell it? Let's double check on the spelling, because I think we've done it. We must have done it. We didn't do it. How do we not do it?
And you know what? Even if we did, it's almost worth a second mention, because it's probably been so long. If it's not any of those places. So I want you to try this free video editor designed for just simple cutting, adding filters, and re-encoding. It supports many file types: AVIs, MPEGs, MKVs, MP4s. And what it does is it makes the task of clipping a selection of video, or re-encoding a video, or re-containerizing video Very, very easy. It has Qt and GTK interfaces available for whatever your pleasure is. And the really nice feature of AvidMux is, say you download a YouTube video, or say you download something off the web and you just you want to go get a sound bite, right? You want to go get a quote, just something fun, right? You want to make a ringtone, whatever. You use AvidMux. You can select just the in and out points you want. It's a little tiny bit hokey, but once you play with it, it works really well. You select the in and out points you want, and then it supports the ability to just copy the source video and audio and recontainerize it. So you can go from an MP4 to an MKV, or from an MKV to an MP4 without having to re-encode the video or audio. So you don't lose any quality, and it's instantaneous because you're just wrapping it in a new container. You're not re-encoding the video. So if you've downloaded like an MKV and you have a device that only plays MP4s, you could use this as long as it's H.264 and an audio codec that the device supports. AvidMux will recontainerize it with no quality loss. This is brilliant for me because I use clips in several of our shows, and I don't want to lose quality because the shows themselves go through an encoding process, and they get encoded again. And so if I'm double encoding, you lose quality. So the nice thing about this is none of that retranscoding. But on top of that, obviously, it's available for Linux, BSD, Mac, and Windows, and it's under it's a GPL app, and it's just, I mean, it unless I'm doing really heavy editing now, it is. This is why I can't believe I haven't talked about it, because it is how I do video editing under Linux. It's how I do 90% of my video editing now, because 90% of what I do is grab a section, clip it, and export it, right? And that's just so much of my workflow. And the fact that I can install it on any of my machines right from the repo means that if I sit down on a machine and I need to clip and I don't have it, 10 seconds later I have it.
See, that right there, what you just touched on, is the number one thing. You know, we all talk about the advantages and disadvantages of proprietary software and open source alternatives and stuff like that. But what you just touched on was the key thing that drove me nuts back when I was a Windows user, was that I would sit down at another machine, or I would reload my own machine, and then I had to go find boxes and CD keys and activation things. And I couldn't take it anymore. Like, that's the one part of using my computer that I just can't deal with anymore. And so I'd rather deal with the concept. I'd rather deal with some of the little weird quirks of Linux software.
And some of it is just the weird quirks of working with H.264 video in AvidMux. So like sometimes it can't clip because it doesn't have a keyframe to go off of and things like that. And that's just the way H.264 video works. So some of its weirdness is that. All right, so that's AvidMux, and that's available for all distributions and pretty much all desktop operating systems. Now we're going to talk about something that's just for the Ubuntu folks. And we don't normally do this on the show. In fact, we haven't done it for quite a while even. But every now and then there's something that comes out that really solves a problem on the Ubuntu desktop that's worth talking about. And we've mentioned it briefly in Linux Unplugged eons ago. It's called AppGrid, AppGrid, AppGrid. You probably have heard about it a bit, but if you haven't tried it, I encourage you to do so. If you're really frustrated with Synaptics or the Ubuntu Software Center or anything like that, give AppGrid a shot. It is an alternative to the Software Center, and it's damn fast. It's written from scratch, and it's designed for speed with swift performance throughout, and it's fairly elegant. It's a clean design, and it also sort of has some of that new Unity touch look to it as well. And it's pretty much ready to go. You download a single deb file, and it's got comments and ratings, and you download one deb file, you install it, and you've got a whole app store with a community that people have been reviewing software and categorizing software. And it's a little intimidating at first because it launches and it's just a long list of software. But you can very quickly go through and start sorting different categories and things like that. One of the other things I like a lot about it is its speed, obviously. But the speed, you don't seem to lose speed while it's installing software. So I can go through and bang, 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 click, install, and I can just keep browsing and keep installing more software. And I'll just add it to the pending queue and just keep banging through them as I go. And it keeps running while I'm doing that. I was pretty impressed. Now, obviously, Ubuntu is not my daily driver, so I haven't played with it a lot, but I played with it a little bit today. I was curious because I know you play with it too. What do you think?
Yeah. So as far as the UI, I love it. I think it's way cleaner. I think it's very well laid out, and I think app discovery is just 10 times better than it is in the Ubuntu store. However, it took me a good 30 seconds to figure out how to actually install something. Like, I didn't see...
Yeah, because the install button's hidden up. That's kind of that's what I mean, the new Unity Touch UI. You know, they put a lot of stuff up there in that banner, that top,
But save that, everything is awesome. And you said it best. I think it really does blow the Ubuntu App Store out of the water. Now, that said, if you're a new user to Linux, if you're new user to Ubuntu, that makes a lot of sense for you. Any of us, come on, we're dropping at the terminal and sudo apt-get install whatever it is we want.
Sure, yeah, but couldn't you see, like, you know, because I know the number one OS you deploy for folks is Ubuntu.
Absolutely. For new people, yeah.
And if somebody was savvy enough to be able to want to install software from time to time, I would way rather put this in front of them.
Yes.
Yeah. So that check it out. You can find it at AppGrid. That's appgrid.org. And then it's just a simple download for Ubuntu 14.04 or later. You got to have the LTS or later. Hey, Noah.
Chris.
Did you know that if you wanted to submit a Runs Linux or a desktop application or an open source project that needs spotlighting, you could do that over at linuxactionshow.reddit.com, and you could submit them there, or you can email them to us directly at linuxactionshow@reddit.com. We love really great desktop apps for Linux that people don't know a lot about. I love exposing, because I think there's this narrative that goes along about, oh, there's no good apps for Linux, really. Like that's what the Mac users say and stuff like that. In actuality, I think Linux has some of the best apps. I mean, like AvidMux and Quazzle and things like this. And then there's other things we all have, like Firefox and Chrome. But there are really, really incredible tools on Linux that just do not get enough attention. If you know of one and we have not given it proper attention, linuxactionshow.reddit.com or email us directly. Go to the contact
You know what
page.
else too we're looking for is Runs Linux.
Yeah, good ones.
If you have some really unique Runs Linux or something that's really cool, particularly the people that are involved with doing like projects like the gentleman that wrote in a couple weeks ago about the school bell project.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that
so
is
neat.
super cool.
Yeah.
And certainly as you're walking around, if you find things that are running Linux, definitely grab a picture from.
Oh, yeah.
But if you have more detailed information of how that's set up, we'd sure like to talk to you. And you can like Chris said, submit it via email, submit it via the Reddit, or you can go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, choose Linux Action Show from the drop-down menu and the contact link, and let us know that way.
That'd be great. And I'll give also a plug while you're over on the Jupiter Broadcasting website. You can check out jupiterbroadcasting.com/rover, where you'll find a live map of my road trip. I'm in Grand Forks right now, and this thing, I look at this rover tracker is sometimes so accurate. Right now, it's literally showing the parking spot that the rover is parked in right now. Like
That's kind of creepy.
It is accurate down to the parking spot level, and that changes from time to time. And we actually had a couple of people come meet up with us along the way because they followed us on the tracker.
Yeah.
So you can follow us in real time. I'm going to be driving for another 7-8 days, I think. Yeah. So at jupiterbroadcasting.com/rover. Also below the map is a link to the Rover YouTube playlist. And we've done 9 Rover logs so far. And
those are really cool.
I think they turned out way better than I expected.
Mm-hmm.
I did not really think I would enjoy them as much as I have posting them. And also they have been extremely popular with the audience too, which is really cool.
I think Hadia hit it on the head, is that a lot of times when you see somebody in something very one-dimensional, it's really cool to see another aspect of their life or another interest of their life. And that's essentially what you're presenting, and that is specifically what the Rover logs exemplify. So if you want to get to know Chris the person rather than Chris the host of the Linux Action
Chris
Show,
the person under extreme circumstances.
right. But you know what? You seem very happy every time.
We're having a really good time.
Yeah.
I mean, we're really enjoying the hell out of it. So we have the YouTube playlist over there. We have a link to the meetup page if you want to get on the meetup discussion, and also you can email us anything roadshow related. I got a great email today from somebody in Utah because we're going to be on the way back to Washington. We're going to go down to Utah. Guy emailed me and says, "Hey, the wife and I would love to cook you guys a home cooked meal while you're on the road."
That's
Isn't that
nice.
great?
That's
yes,
so nice.
I know. Rover at jupiterbroadcasting.com. Really nice to hear from you guys. Also getting some great ideas on how I can set up some really nice DC power setups in the mobile studio. So I appreciate all of that. And then also anyone who wants to support the show over at all the shows, every show on the network, and the road trip effort. Patreon.com/today. We are posting exclusives for people that want to know even more behind the scenes of the road trip stuff. It's really something really cool that is really unique and personalized that we're making available exclusively to our supporters at patreon.com/today. So thank you everybody who's kicking in over there. We really appreciate it. And it has been a great road trip. And I encourage you to check out the Rover Log YouTube playlist. It's linked over at jupiterbroadcasting.com/rover. They're all really short videos too. So it's not a big waste time. Well, there's 9 of them now. So now it's getting to be a bit of a time waster, but each of them go pretty quick. All right, Noah, let's do the news.
Hey, it's the news, and this episode is brought to you by
Ting.com. Go to last.ting.com. That's les.ting.com. You'll get our $50 discount. That's only going to be good for the month of September. $50 discount off of any device. Or if you have a Ting compatible device, guess what, Noah?
You can get
$50 of service credit. Or you could get it off your device. I mean, it depends. It depends. If you got it. So here's the thing, Noah. Here's the thing. They have a CDMA network and a GSM network. Now, I know you're not hip to these technologies, Noah, but these are 2 different types of cellular technologies.
Oh,
okay. Yeah.
All on one service there.
Yeah. You get to choose and pick there, Noah. You get to choose and pick between your CDMA and your GSM. Now, if you have a device on one of these networks already, you could bring it over to Ting, and then you get a $50 service credit. Now, Noah, I'm not making promises, but I'm telling you there's a very, very good chance that's going to pay for more than your first month of service.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure.
Oh, yeah.
See, we converted them. I have gotten into this habit of buying unlocked GSM devices because I really feel like I own my phone. Mm-hmm. So the other night, I had a friend come over to my house, and I was telling him about Ting, And he goes, oh, I really want to try that. What should I use?
Yeah.
And so we went to Amazon. Have you heard of the company Blue?
Yes.
So
they have some Blue phones on Ting.
So we bought an unlocked GSM dual SIM Android phone for $35.
Really?
Prime eligible. It'll be here on Monday.
Yeah, well, they've got some crazy good deals on the Blue phone, actually. If you go to last.ting.com, so you get the $50 deal, then it's really nuts. So let's see, I was trying to remember. So here's the Blue Mini, the LTD edition, unlocked, no contract, no early termination fee, only pay for what you use, flat $6 a month, $111 for the Blue Mini LTE. For an unlocked Android phone that you just don't, and it looks like the design is very similar to the HTC One, so I dig that a lot. And you know what I have been using is I've been using the hell out of the Netgear Zing. Ting has given me a Netgear Zing to use on the road, and the thing I really like about the Netgear Zing is it is all on one screen. Everything from the Wi-Fi password, the password you need to know to join the network, and everything is just right there on the OLED screen. Here's the other thing though, is I had to do a little technical troubleshooting with this bad mamma jamma.
Yeah,
being able to right on the LCD screen or OLED screen, whatever it is, being able to like go in and update the PLR codes and update the carrier settings and reset the factory defaults without having to go into a web browser, without having to have my box join the crappy wireless network that hasn't been set up yet and not be able to talk to anything. I can just do it right there on the screen of the device and I can read it back, and it's just so nice for setup.
Have you ever done that thing where you're trying to troubleshoot, so you Google the page and then you connect to the hotspot so you configure it, but then you can't refresh the page, so you get back and then it loses it altogether. So you have to go back to the first hotspot and refresh your page and then go back to that.
Netgear Zing solves all that. It's a flat $6 a month once you buy it. It's unlocked, you own it. And here's the other thing. I've only charged this thing twice. This whole road trip.
Really?
Yeah, I've only charged it twice. I think the thing's like mostly battery.
And it looks like an expensive device too. Like it looks really, really high class. Like I wouldn't mind sitting down at a meeting table and setting that down as compared to some of these plastic fingerprinty things.
You know what else, Noah? It has two little tabby tabs that flip open, and then you can plug in a larger antenna to it. So it has the hookups built into the Zing for a larger antenna setup. So that makes getting when you have a weaker signal and you want to just get every bit of signal you can, amazing for that. You can get a little Yagi antenna and hook it up to these things. You're good to go.
I'm proud of you.
What?
You used a ham radio term.
Well,
I think that's terrific.
Look what this trailer's doing to me, man. Look what this.
But no, what better of a device to use on a road trip?
Yeah, exactly. So go over to last.ting.com. You get the $50 discount. Also check out their blog. This is just sort of right up my alley. It's not like it's going to solve all your wireless problems, but I think this particular one might solve your cable problems. Choosing the best set-top box is step one on the way to cutting the cord for good. And they have a write-up about the pros and cons of a lot of the different set-top boxes. And if you're kind of in the cord-cutting market right now, it's worth checking it out. Go to last.ting.com. Even if you're not going to get a Ting phone, you can support the show by going to last.ting.com. Read their blog, dig around the Ting site, and honestly, if you're just kind of curious about how Ting would work for you, try their savings calculator. They'll just put in your existing usage, and you can see what it is. I mean, it's a flat $6 a month for a phone, and then it's just pay for your usage. It's really straightforward. And they have CDMA and GSM to pick from. So go to last.ting.com, and you got a couple more days to take advantage of that $50 discount. Last.ting.com, and a big thank you to Ting for sponsoring Linux Action Show. Man, am I a happy boy. Oh my gosh, Gnome 3.18 is out. Now, I haven't updated yet because it hasn't hit Arch Stable yet, but I am checking every single moment. Number one feature for me, even though I am not a fan of Google Drive anymore, I'm still using it for a lot of show notes, integrated Google Drive right into Nautilus. What you got? Nautilus, speaking of Nautilus, I love the new copy dialog improvements. It looks so slick. It's using the new GTK3 popover technology that's only been around for like one GNOME release, and now they're using it for some really slick stuff. Also, the Places sidebar looks a lot cleaner, a lot more organized. They also have a new location called Other Locations, which provides useful overviews of local network locations and things like that all in one spot. Haven't tried it yet, but I'm really looking forward to that because I use network browsing in Nautilus quite a bit.
And it seems like they did a lot of little polish. Like, look at the cancel buttons next to the transfer.
Yeah, right.
Like, they're those big blocky X's before, and now that's like a little round button, and it has some like shading and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I believe they're pulling from the Edwadia theme, so whatever your theme is, those buttons will reflect that theme, which is really nice. You can also, just for those of us who have touchscreens on our laptops, there's been some improvements there on how GNOME handles like contextual menus and things like that. And while dragging file and folder, no, it doesn't care at all. While dragging, hey, my XPS has a touchscreen. And if you noticed, I actually used it the other day for a very useful thing because you were holding it and you had your hands and mouse on the keyboard, but it wasn't connected to the wireless. So I just tapped the screen and connected it to wireless without having to take the computer from you. That is actually kind of useful. And you know what else I use it for is sometimes, this is a bad visual, but sometimes I'm sitting in bed with the laptop on my belly. right? And yeah.
And what are you doing with the laptop on your belly
and like,
in bed at night?
And the trackpad's like on my boobs, you know, so it's like way up on my body,
so that the lower part of your body is not obstructed with anything. Is what you're telling me?
I guess. But
okay,
not,
all right.
Yeah. But because my hands are on the screen, so they're not doing anything hanky. But what I do is I hold the laptop by the screen, and I put my two thumbs on the right and left, and I can scroll through articles that I'm reading with my right thumb, like a tablet, while it sits on my belly.
So, just out of curiosity, why can't it sit on your lap like every other normal person? Is that there's something?
First of all, my belly likes the warm laptop. Oh, second of all, because last night, like for example, I was laying in the hotel room and I just had the pillows propped up, and I was watching Star Trek on TV. It was pretty awesome. It was good. Anyways, back to Gnome.
Star Trek, that's what they're calling it these days.
So we talked about this in Linux Unplugged, but I don't know if we mentioned it in last. I think it's worth a mention. Is we now are also getting like firmware updates through Gnome software, which is really nice. Now you have to be a part of the Linux vendor firmware service. It's a new initiative. It aims to make it possible for hardware manufacturers to distribute firmware updates on Linux in Gnome software. So now, like if you have a firmware piece, instead of having like reboot into like FreeDOS or whatever to update something, or load into Windows if they only have a Windows like updater, they're going to be able to do it right now through Gnome software.
How many companies do you think will take advantage of that?
Well,
it's really cool, but I don't see, Lenovo publishing a BIOS update for me through.
What if Lenovo went all in? Like this is our Linux laptop, and this is our premier Linux laptop, and then
I know a lot of people aren't going to like this, but I would say if there's going to be a company that's going to do that, it's going to be Dell.
Maybe. I think they should. I think because here's why is whichever company does it, that's going to be the company that I'm going to want to buy a laptop from, like my next laptop possibly. I mean, if it's a good machine and I can get all my firmware updates that way.
Right.
The new calendar application finally makes it into Gnome. You've been able to play with it for a while. It came actually in as a preview in Gnome 3.16, and it's actually now shipping as standard. Automatic screen brightness control is now available if your machine has an integrated light sensor like most laptops do. New characters application's really good. A lot of other improvements in speed and bug fixes. So the new Gnome 3.18 is looking so good. I loves it. I can't wait to get my hands on it. But if it sucks, I'll tell you the truth when we try it. I will review it. I'm not gonna. Sometimes I get all excited about these things I try. I'm like, oh, that was bad. But they've been nailing it out of the park with these latest releases. Admit it, Noah.
I do like Gnome. In fact, here's the thing. Here's how you can tell I like Gnome. I have no shortage of Ubuntu laptops. Yet the laptop that's sitting in front of me is running Gnome.
That's true.
So it's not like it'd be real. It's not like it'd be a whole lot of challenge to me to go grab an Ubuntu computer. Or a Fedora laptop for that matter. So
I was kind of inferring about this a little bit during the pick segment and during when we were talking about that Z-Wave box that runs Linux. So Qualcomm is also kind of getting on the Ubuntu Snappy bandwagon, and they're doing something really interesting. They're going for a drone reference platform. Ubuntu-powered drone reference platform. Yes, you heard that right. An unmanned aerial vehicle, or UAV could be another way to put it. It was announced by Qualcomm last week. It's called Snapdragon Flight. Now, the Snapdragon is Qualcomm's brand of processors. The Snapdragon 801-based development platform supports Lenovo's version of Ubuntu, as well as OpenCV, according to an email to Linux.com and from Qualcomm representatives. Here's the deets. It's going to support VGA video cameras. It's going to have stereo. It's going to offer dual-band 802.11n Wi-Fi, Bluetooth 4.0, 5 gigahertz GPS. It provides a variety of sensors, including inertial measurement units, a barometer sensor, and ports for additional sensors you could add yourself. It also supports advanced real-time flight control with the help of the Snapdragon 801 system-on-a-chip Hexagon DSP. Yep, it's a Hexagon DSP. Qualcomm says they plan to release these later and in 2016. Intel's also announced it's investing $60 million into a Hong Kong-based company called China DJI, who's trying to do something similar. And
DJI,
yeah,
that makes me. They make the Phantom, right?
Yeah, and they're going to get it. Yeah, I know. And Intel's working with them to do. Yeah, this is heating up. And earlier this week, Early Robotics, ERLE, I think it's called Early Robotics, launched an Indiegogo campaign for a 6-legged early spider robot running a snappy Ubuntu core on a Raspberry Pi 2 Model B board. It starts at $400. The embedded-oriented Snappy provides features like secure transactional updates, as well as open-source app development platforms. Now, the Snapdragon Flight from Qualcomm will be using Ubuntu, but remember, it's using Lenovo's version of Ubuntu, which they say is essentially the same thing. Like, you get app downloads, but no transactional updates. I don't know how you call it Ubuntu Snappy if you don't get transactional updates, but apparently that's a thing. Snapdragon Flight is available today for select OEMs and expected to be available commercially in the first half of 2016. Now imagine
That's so cool.
A Ubuntu-powered drone platform that you could buy or JB would buy that we would then build on top of for media production or for we were just looking at on Unfilter, we were looking at these drones that were building a rope bridge.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Could you imagine running
do that? Yeah, man.
Cat5 cable with a drone, running Cat5?
My dog, my smaller dog, he's only like that big. I bet I could have the drone walk him. I could take him outside and let him go to the bathroom, and then could bring him back in and walk him around the block.
Speaking of home automation, what else you could do is you could just have a few automated drones that land and recharge and then fly again and just do automated surveillance of your home all the time.
Don't tempt me. I could have a drone that has a Raspberry Pi and it could be a flying torrent server.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and it could go to different places and connect to different public Wi-Fi so I could torrent stuff without getting in trouble.
Oh.
Not that I would ever download anything illegal.
No.
Like that.
All right, so those of you who play Steam are probably pretty excited by the fact that, boy, I sound like an old man. You play that Steam, kids? Well, guess what? There's 1,500 games natively available for Steam on Linux. 1,500 games. That is 1,500 for those of you in the UK.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, that's quite significant. So Windows is at 6,464 to put it in perspective. The Mac is at 2,323. We are catching up to the Mac like nobody's business. And new games continue to be ported almost daily. The Steam counter still shows Linux market share below 1%, but I don't think that's too surprising since there hasn't been any major exclusives on Linux.
Not only that, the other thing is I think where Valve is anticipating that this is really going to take off is when they actually put a box in the living room. Because I tell you what, the biggest reason I haven't touched Steam is because I don't have a box in my living room. The second that I can put an entertainment box in my living room and I can go back to the days when I was playing N64, except do it with modern games, I'm going to be buying more games. And all those games are going to be running on Linux effectively.
Also, speaking of the Steam machine, I guess some improved support for the new Valve controller was personally hand tested by Greg KH and merged into the 4.2 Linux kernel, I believe. So the Linux kernel is going to have native out-of-the-box support for the Valve Steam controller, which probably also means the final Steam boxes will ship with kernel 4.2. Because Valve worked with Greg personally to get him a controller so he could try it and make sure the driver works in the kernel.
Jeez, man. Think about what that means. When we're at 2015 now, and what you're telling me is that we are at a point where if you install Linux, you're going to have better out-of-the-box support for your game controller right from the manufacturer than you will if you did it on Windows. And not only is that the case, but that's not a case of, well, it's been 10 years, so now that old printer works with. No. This is like a brand new device.
Hasn't even shipped yet.
And it will work right out of the box with Linux.
Yep.
That just tells you how far we've come.
Yeah, and we'll see if there's ever any exclusives that really push Linux gaming on the desktop. I don't know, but I think if SteamOS has some traction, it probably will naturally overflow into the Linux desktop. So that is something to definitely watch for. Now, Noah, this story's been floating around for a couple of weeks. I think it came out towards the end of August, and I just love it to pieces because Windows 10 has people freaked out about privacy, and it's one of the many reasons we've heard in our inboxes that people are looking at Linux. Windows 10 is seriously driving some Linux adoption because people are freaked out about privacy. Now, obviously, that's a niche of the Windows switchers, but it's a very important one because it's probably one of the more educated populace of the Windows user base.
Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse than Windows 8.
Yeah, just when you thought. This terrifying new Windows 10 feature could out kids to their parents. Now, they use the example of perhaps like a kid running Windows 10 in a computer that's set up in with a family account could be automatically telling parents that their teens are visiting LGBT support websites and emailing details of all kinds of nasty things. This feature, enabled by default for anyone who registered family accounts, it sends weekly breakdowns of browsing history to the parents. Even the kids, even when they try to browse anonymously in private mode, it still sends them reports of where they visited and what websites they went to. The tool also specifically flags up search terms and blocked content that children tried to access, meaning teens experimenting, say, with their sexuality or something along those lines, will have that stuff detailed in an email directly to their parents.
That's horrible. Now, you know what this isn't going to catch? This is not going to catch the teens that are smart enough to use our $10 promo code to get a DigitalOcean droplet and then use X2Go to get into their DigitalOcean droplet and then do all their browsing on their DigitalOcean droplet.
Right. Yeah. Basically, if you listen to the show, you know how to bypass that.
Yeah, exactly. No, but in a more serious vein, though, forget the child use, right? We have plenty of tools, and as a parent, I appreciate the tools that I can use to control my kids. Of it, right? But when it is integrated by default into the operating system, imagine the potential for abuse. Imagine the potential for me to go over to a buddy's house that doesn't really know much about his computer, and I set this up. I mean, it's one thing if I have to install software and he sees me downloading something, but if all I'm doing is I'm in the control panel and I'm toggling buttons.
Can I give you a devil's advocate?
Yeah,
not
please,
that I would
please.
not that I would actually do this, but if you think about it, software that you install on your PC that monitors everything you do is essentially, by very definition,
Spyware.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you have to give it unfettered access. You have to implicitly trust the vendor. Yeah. And we have seen stories about spyware software that was totally bogus.
Absolutely.
And the thing is also it generally impacts performance and, who knows if updates break it and things like that. So if Microsoft has acknowledged that this is something a decent percentage of their user base wants, maybe it makes sense to integrate into the operating system instead of rely on hokey third-party bolted-on software?
So I would say, not all of them, but I'd say 80% of the detractors that you just spoke about on third-party software would apply to Microsoft. You still have to trust that Microsoft is on the up and up with implementing that software. And
what is Microsoft's responsibility if they get a national security letter or a warrant from the United States government because they're trying to stop some kid from putting an alarm clock in a suitcase?
And then the big thing that makes the difference to me and why I say there's a deep line in the sand and I'm on one side and what you're talking about is on the other side is at the end of the day, if I go to third-party software, it's my choice. I have chosen to install it. Whereas in the operating system, I'm no longer getting a choice.
That's true. These are turned on by default when you enable a family account.
Yeah,
Default is excessive.
And I don't even want the ability there on the computer by default. Right. I would like it to be totally not even existent unless I explicitly go out and look for it.
Well, and as a parent, I would look at this and go, well, so does that mean then that they have essentially just built surveillance into my operating system?
Yeah, that's exactly what it means. That's exactly what it means.
And that's creepy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would make me want to switch to Linux. Parents, switch your kids to Ubuntu. Then here's what you do. I only have 3 kids, so I may not be qualified to talk on the subject.
Right.
But, what I would do is try a little parenting to say what you can and cannot do. Combine that with a little open DNS or whatever you want at the router level. And then put them on Linux because kids are going to be kids and they're going to go to sites, they're going to download things, they're going to have crap in them. The worst thing you could do for your child is put them on Windows because that machine is going to get gunked up. It's going to be... When my children use technology, I want them to come away excited and interested and curious.
Yeah.
I do not want them to be frustrated, discouraged, and annoyed.
And scared. Scared if I click on this, scared if I install that, scared if I try this, my computer won't work and I can't do this.
Yeah.
And I take it to the example of if you had a swimming pool in your backyard, you can tell your kids all day long, don't jump in the pool. Don't jump in the pool. If you don't know how to swim, don't jump in the pool. You can put up fences. But at the end of the day, if you know your kid's going to get in the pool, don't you think it'd be a good idea to teach him how to swim?
Yeah.
And I look at the same thing with the computer.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
When you put Linux in front of them, it's safer. But then when they start to get curious, it doesn't limit their potential.
Yeah.
And that to me is like the key thing. Like my son Dylan, he is 6 years old. He is now tracking like Minecraft version releases and the features.
Yeah.
And he's like, Dad, he's telling me last night. 1.9 comes in and they have this new command called /realworld and he's telling me like, oh, well, what /realworld does, and he's like, I keep checking updates on my laptop, but the new package hasn't come down yet. I'm like, wow, this is amazing.
Way to go, son.
And he's like, do you tell me how to get Minecraft 1.9? I'm like, no, I don't know how to do that. Like, okay, that's great.
Do you know how to tell me how to get Minecraft 1?
He's gonna be.
Yeah.
I mean, and so the thing is though with that is, like, I never expected him to go that route. I never even had any expectations, but because the ability for him was there, he had the choice and he took it. And I hate the idea of taking that choice away from the potential for students to learn because when we were that age, there was a lot more potential. There was a lot more things to tinker with. And now there's just a lot less.
Yeah.
And this is going to make the computer even more scary. So, yeah. Well, that is just another good case for when somebody's saying, so what's the main advantages of Linux over Windows 10? Well, here's one more you can add to the list. All right, Noah, that's all the news for this week. It started as a joke, and now I'm here. Noah invited me out to Grand Forks, North Dakota to see his automated home, to see how it all works, and maybe if I'd be interested in doing something just like that, or maybe you. And we thought, why not? Why not do it? So we packed up the JB Rover, we came out, and now I am here in Grand Forks, North Dakota, to see how Noah actually automated his home. I've already gotten a tour, and it is freaking cool. So before we get into that, I want to tell you about our segment sponsor. That is the great folks over at System76.com. They are the creators, the builders of machines that are born to run Ubuntu. And what that really means is you're going to get a really good out-of-the-box experience. All the hardware is going to work. The backlighting on the key is going to be controlled by hardware switches. Your brightness, your wireless, all of that's going to work great under Linux. And the other thing that's really nice is if you ever opt to go beyond Ubuntu, System 76 has done their homework. It's very likely any other distro is going to work just great. They really make sure that a lot of the stuff you want to use is supported by the Linux kernel. And on the really rare off chance it's not, when they're really pushing the envelope, they create a really nice System 76 driver package for you to just kind of smooth out the rough edges. But less and less that's necessary now that so many hardware vendors upstream are working with the kernel developers. So what System 76 has done is created these different machines that they have specially made sure work great with Linux. And they have a good range of selections. Laptops and desktops. In fact, if you want like a Mac Mini killer type little machine, the Meerkat is such a slick option. It's a better option than the Mac Mini, built to run Linux. They also have the Sable, which is an all-in-one, and then they have the Ratel Performance. It's $659. That's like $58 a month if you do their leasing, and it is a sleeper. It is a really nice machine, but what I like about it is it's the type of machine that if you do like I do and you just kind of want to ramp it up, you can add parts into it over time. Now, it's sold out, so you're not going to be able to get it till the end of September, so maybe check out some of their other machines. Like the Wild Dog is also like that. You can get it with discrete graphics or integrated graphics and then step it up over time. And if you want to go all the way to the max, they got the Leopard Extreme and the Silverback. Some really great machines, some of these built right here in the US of A, and they have some 12-month financing, all new destinations they can ship to, some new countries, so check that out. System76.com, creators of machines designed to run Linux. Tell them the Linux Action Show sent you, won't you, when you check out? And go get yourself something nice and get to play with your Linux and stop fighting with your hardware. System76.com. Thank you, guys. So, Noah, tell me a little bit about why you decided to automate your home. Is it just pure geek factor? And did you have a lot of spousal buy-off issues? Because that would be what I would think a big problem.
Automating my house actually started back when I was still living with my parents. And I wanted to, I was at Menards and they had an X10 home automation kit, and it was $100, and you got two little plug-in modules that you plug into the outlet, and then you can plug like a lamp or something into it and turn it off or on with your computer. Now, as a 16, 17-year-old kid, I was like, I can turn things on or off with my computer. I have to have that. So I bought it and I took it home, and I started off, I set it up on a computer and I was turning my lights on and off. Then I realized that I could use, at the time, VNC from a laptop over in my bed to shut the light off in my room. And there started this little idea of like, hey, this is actually really neat that I can shut the light off and then make my way to the bed without having to trip over things. Mm-hmm. And then it expanded a little bit more. I bought an X10 remote that I could turn things on and off. And then when I moved out and moved into a condo, I automated the condo with X10. And so I put all the X10 light switches in, and I had the X10 remote, and I had an X10 bed controller, and everything was automated with X10. The problem with X10 is it, from the very beginning, always felt like a bad science project. Because what would happen is I would walk into the room and I'd hit the button, and like 90% of the time, everything was fine and the light would turn on. But 10% of the time, the light wouldn't turn on, and then I was just stuck in a dark room. And actually, that's worse than if it worked all the time, because I lost trust in it.
Yes.
And so I moved out of the condo and I moved into my house, and I started researching how can I automate my house. And I wanted to go, I knew from the very beginning that I was going to go all the way. I wasn't just going to do just the lights. And so I wanted to expand beyond that. And so I started looking at what I wanted to automate. Now, you can automate around something. So they have...
You can automate around something,
and I'll explain.
Okay.
You can automate around a controller. So, for example, Crestron systems, which we install for commercial venues, there is an automating controller, and everything ties, and it's automated around that controller. So you buy a separate light system tied into the controller, buy a security system. Okay.
Sort of like that Z-Wave we were looking at, right?
Kind of, except it's a much more expensive and proprietary less friendly, user-friendly version.
Yeah.
Or you can use peer-to-peer automation like Insteon. Insteon is like these...
mesh networking?
They use mesh networking. Now, I tried Insteon, and mesh network...
That sounds really futuristic, man.
It does, but it is a waste of frequency spectrum. And so what happens is like the first 2 work really well, and then 3 makes everything else work really well, and then 4 and 5 make everything...
And you're jamming up your signal after that?
And then after that, somewhere along the line, there's a diminishing point of return, and then everything starts clouding, and then things stop working.
Oh, wow.
So that didn't work. Now, after that, I looked at a company called HAI, which automates around security systems. So you install the security system, and then you can tie your lights into the security system, and you can tie, the obviously the security system itself and home theater and stuff like that. Right about that time, if anyone remembers, Linux Media Center came out, and that was the promise that you replaced your router with your Linux Media Center box.
Yeah.
and it would control. And so
you would start play, and it would automatically dim your lights, and it would set all your inputs,
and it would do all the phones,
and it would close your blinds and mute the phones. Yeah, exactly.
So I bought a box and I installed Linux Media Center, and it was a complete and total disaster. I mean,
I did the same thing.
Nothing worked at all.
It never worked, did it?
Well, so then,
why was that?
Then I bought another box and I installed it, and it was a complete disaster. 4 times I was dumb enough to buy different hardware, each with a recommendation. Finally, I went on the forum and I said, somebody give me a recommendation. If you go back on the Linux Media Center forums, you can probably find my post because it's posted under kernel Linux. And these guys said, well, this is the motherboard that we use for testing. And I said, it's no longer in production. And so they go, yeah, but there's a lot of other motherboards that work. And I'm like, all right, let me rephrase my question again, more succinctly. Somebody give me a link to something I can buy today on Newegg that will work when I order it and get it in my house and install it, because I am sick and tired and I'm at my wit's end. And the very next follow-up post was this guy going, dude, I hear you. Believe me, I hear you. I was the exact same way, and every word that you wrote resonates with me really strongly. I just don't have an answer for you. Mine was an older version and it worked just fine, but they don't make it anymore. But
oh, man.
And then I bailed, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just not doing it anymore. So I was friends with the guy, and I called him and I said, I'm really frustrated. I tried X10 and it didn't quite work out for me. And I've tried these other little systems for a little bit and they didn't work. And then I spent a ton of money and I spent a ton of time trying to get this Linux Media Center thing to work, and that didn't work. What can I use? And he said, check out Lutron. So I took a look at Lutron, and Lutron had an original system called the Radio Raw system. And the Radio Raw system is RF transmitters. There's RF receiver and transmitters that are inside of the light switches themselves, the dimmers themselves. And then there was a central controller that tied into the LAN that gave me access via a web page where I can control the lights, and had a smartphone interface and stuff like that. And then they had an IR interface where I could send remote a command from my remote. And
that's
then it would
handy for like the TV and the receiver.
Yep. And then they had a security system tie-in, so I could start tying that in. And then a couple years in, because the big limitation with Radio Raw 1 was that it was limited to 35 devices. So in a small house or a small condo or a small apartment, you're fine, but I wanted to automate everything. And so Radio Raw 2 fixed all the problems that they had in Radio Raw 1. And you can automate, I think the upper limit is I think it's 200 devices on a single controller, and then you can add an additional controller for another 200 or something like that. It's absurd. And essentially, you want to consider a couple things when you're looking at a home automation system, and you want to consider, how do I interface to other systems? Can I tie this light control system into my security system? Can I tie it into a drawer control system? Can I tie it into my home theater? You want to look at what kind of I/O the system offers. Is it communicating over the network to tie into these other systems? A really popular way is what we call normally closed or normally open, where there's a set of contacts, the best example of which being like your garage door opener or your doorbell. When I close a set of contacts, something happens.
So when you press the button on the garage door opener,
right,
it's actually connecting a set of contacts that activates the motor, and then the motor does its thing.
So you could take a pair of wires and just touch the wires, and that would open and close your garage door.
Yeah.
That's a really, really open source, a rudimentary open source, but a really, really open source way of doing things.
Because you can just splice right in, right?
Exactly. If I say, when these two contacts are closed, I want you to make this light scene come on, as long as every other company is making devices that can close contacts based on an action, I can make things happen. And so when you walk up to my house, the first thing you'll notice is in the corner there's a camera. So you're on camera all the way from the driveway in, so I can see anyone that's approaching. Once you approach the house, there's an RFID reader on the side of the house. You can hold up your credential. I have my one that I hang around my neck, but I've also, you've seen the ones that are on my.
It's a key badge that you would use to get into like a business or something like that.
And incidentally, you've probably noticed I have the same one at my office.
Yeah.
So I just carry one key with me.
Yeah.
I swipe that. That will disengage a set of electromagnetics locks that are on the door.
So those doors are held closed by a magnet?
Yep. It requires 1,400 pounds of force to separate the magnets. It would require 650 to punch a hole through the door. So yes, you're keeping the honest people honest to a certain degree, but the reality is I have a huge picture window and a glass sliding door. If somebody wants to break in, they're going to do that.
Yeah.
Now, once my credentials are swiped on the RFID system, which is made by Carry Systems, it de-energizes the electromagnetic lock and simultaneously disarms the security system inside. Then I can get into the house. When the motion detector in the inside of the house detects that I've walked in, it turns on the lights. Alternatively, when I'm pulling up in my driveway, I have a transponder in my car. If I push a button, that will start this entire process off and say, turn on the lights, disengage the security system,
unlock
the doors.
When we came in your front door, so you hit the security badge on your door. The door opens, and immediately we enter the entryway, and your entryway lights come on like, what, 30% power or something
Everything
like that?
by default comes on to 20%.
20%, okay.
And
so it's like a nice dim light when you walk in, but it's not blasting you in the face, but if it's dark out, it's plenty of light.
Right. And what I found was that most people, when you just need enough light to see what you're doing. It doesn't need to be full bore. And so it will monitor. Now, there is an upgrade to the Radio Raw 2 if anyone is concerned about environmental issues. The software upgrade enables it to tie in with the Chronos time clock. And what the Chronos time clock does is it talks to the internet and gets a real time when sunset is and where sunrise is. And if it detects the sun is sunny out or if there's cloud cover, it will activate the motion detectors. If it sees that there's tons of sun coming in from the windows, it will deactivate the motion detectors. So you can have it set up so that if it's sunny out, I don't want the lights to come on.
Yeah, I asked you said you had something in your yard that was automated. And I said, oh, is that using a photo sensor? How does it know when to activate it?
Same system. So the outside landscaping lights are tied into the to the Radio Raw 2 system, and that's tied to the Chronos system. So the Chronos system goes out to the internet and says this is when sunset is, and then it talks to the light controller, and the light controller says 20 minutes before sunset, I'm going to turn on the landscaping lights, and 20 minutes after sunset, I turn them off. Now the advantage.
So does this improve your power usage?
Absolutely, because if anyone's ever absent from a room for more than 10 minutes, the lights turn off.
Yeah.
So I can say without a shadow of a doubt, if we're not in the house, I can promise you every light in the house is off.
Yeah.
And I can also guarantee you that you'll never stand inside of a dark room in my house.
Yeah.
As long as the light bulbs are energized. As long as they're good light bulbs.
While we're still on the subject of lights, like you can also do special time of day patterns. So like you have like a special setup in the morning.
So the way that you program the light switches, everyone thinks of light switches as an on or off, and that's a very antiquated way to look at it. Really, we don't want to create lights on or off. We want to create scenes. So for example, when I'm cooking in the kitchen, I want a lot of light on the countertops. I want I don't want it totally dark, but I also don't need it really bright on the kitchen table because I want to see what's over there. I don't want this dark area of the house, but I also don't want to be wasting energy. And then there's going to be people in the living room that need to converse and stuff. But again, I want the primary, they don't need to be like, it doesn't have to be really bright and blinding to them. And so my kitchen scene gives the focus on the kitchen and I can do work. Then when I go to eat dinner, I want the kitchen to dim down, but I want the focus to be on the dining room. And then when I leave the dining room and I want to go sit down and have conversation afterwards, I want the focus on the living room.
So in practice, does this lighting arrangement, once it's set up, is it is it out of mind?
Flawless.
So you're not contemplating what mode things are in. No. It's just all kind of happening.
No, because the rule of so far I've been speaking as a consumer. Now we install this stuff for other people. As an installer, what we're taught is you arrange those buttons in order of increasing light intensity. So the bottom button will give the lowest intensity in the room. The top button will give the highest light intensity of the area. So there is a method to how those are, but no.
That seems logical.
It is when we go to sit down for dinner, I'll either go up and hit dinner and it is mindless, or I just tell Sarah, I say, hey, go hit dinner.
You even have it, don't you have it tied into a degree with the heating system in your bathroom too?
Yeah. So originally, Lutron actually makes a thermostat that tied into the to the HVAC system. I have pulled that out because we're actually selling the house. So if you want to buy a house that's wired for automation, unfortunately, with the amount of money I've spent on it, it's all coming with me. But
it's wired for it though. The gear is going with you, but it's wired.
Yeah, all the stuff is wired for it. But the heat lamps in the bathroom are just a function of it's just a light bulb. And so in the morning when I get up, there's a button next to my bed that I push, and it kicks off the good morning sequence of the house. So coffee pot turns on, and the hot light in the bathroom turns on to heat the bathroom. Then when I actually get into the bathroom, the motion detector detects me. It will kill the heat lamp and then turn the lights to 15% because I hate seeing light in the morning.
Super bright
light. It needs
light.
to be really dark, right?
Yeah.
While I had it tied into the thermostat, at night it was 68 degrees because that's what we like it to sleep at, and then during the day it's 72 degrees. And that has allowed me to. I've essentially automated around the lights, right?
Yeah.
Now, I have tied that into other things. So, for example, universal remote controls, or URC as they're kind of called in the business, is they allow you to do some really, really creative things with remotes. And so essentially the remotes communicate to a base station via RF.
And this is like a remote for your TV, anything like that, right?
Well, so you can use it for a TV, or you can use it for the lights. Or
okay. Yeah. So it's a house-wide remote.
Right.
Okay.
And so it's RF, and it communicates with the base station. So I have a base station in my home theater, for example, and it has little IR blasters on the receiver and on my Western Digital TV Live and on the projector. And then, of course, it also ties in via RF to the Lutron lighting system. So when I say I'm coming into the theater, It automatically turns the projector on, automatically turns on the receiver, turns it to the appropriate input, turns on the Western Digital TV Live.
Oh, nice.
And then turns on the lights a little bit. When I selected a movie and I hit play, it dims the lights down, cranks the volume way up.
You know what I like about that is about once a year I'm changing up the home theater setup, and so like I have to retrain everybody on how to use it, and now I got to show the kids and I got to show Ange, and it's just like it is an intense amount of work just to like change out maybe a Roku or to change out something like that. So what you're essentially doing is you're making it the same process for your family, regardless of the back end technology.
Yeah, Sarah's sister actually came over, who knows nothing about the technical setup, and walks and goes, watch a movie, click, oh, we can watch a movie.
Yeah, and it's even more nuanced than that. Like, there's different stages. Like, you can, when the movie ends, the lighting comes up a little bit, and like while the movie's like still getting set up, like you have like dim theater lighting that then darkens completely once the movie starts, and it's really neat.
And so the thing is, a lot of people overlook the practical ramifications. So you have a security system at your house, right? But how often have you ever been in a hurry so you don't think to arm it when you leave? Well, my house knows that if it doesn't detect any motion in the house at all for a set period of time, and it knows that the request to exit has been initiated, which is the detection of somebody leaving the house.
Okay. Really?
Yeah, and so it pieces that together and says, after a certain amount of time, if there's no motion and the request to exit has been initiated, I'm going to arm the system.
So it's following a certain like a logic tree there.
Right. Yeah.
And so you've got it in the theater, you got it throughout the house, you got it in the bathroom. It's really neat seeing the different scene modes. How does this work from like a practical like technology gear standpoint? Or is your house riddled with gear? Is it all proprietary? What's that like?
So the access control system or the door control system is made by a company called Carry Systems.
Okay.
The software to program it only runs on Windows. I don't actually have a Windows box, so I run that inside of a VM the 1 or 2 times I've ever needed to program it. Now, the reality is what I've done, I went through and I programmed a bunch of keys and I turned them on, and I just have a stack of keys sitting in the house, and I treat it like I would treat any other key in my house. The only time I go into it is if I lose one, or if, like for now, I modified one that I gave to the real estate agent that's selling the house, because they can show the house during the day. There's no reason anyone needs to be in my house after like 9 o'clock, so their key's turned off.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And the only way to program that key, though, is using VirtualBox and Windows.
Is using VirtualBox and Windows.
So that's a downside.
Now, I did get
it's manageable.
I did get it to work under Wine, but to get the COM port, because it's a program with the serial port, to get all of that stuff to flow through Wine was just way more work than it was just to run it inside of VirtualBox, and that was a pain. Now, the second piece of software that we use to program is the Universal Remote Control software, and that again only runs on Windows. And so again, I'm running that in a VirtualBox, but I set that up one time when I programmed the remote, and I haven't touched it since. In 7 years, I've never changed a program on the remote. And
are you at all? I mean, I know this is going to come up in the feedback. It's already come up in the chat room a couple of times. What about the major security ramifications of having your locks automated and having your security camera systems automated and all of that?
Right.
Like that seems like you're asking for somebody to screw with you remotely or something.
So the locks. So when it comes to locks, we have to identify the purpose of a lock, and the purpose of a lock is to keep the honest people honest. When the light is orange and you turn the door handle and it doesn't open, that means I would not like you to enter my house. Now, I have other security measures, which you've seen.
Yes.
So the door and the locks are primarily there for everyone else's safety, not mine. But if you want to get into my house and you prefer not to heed my warning that's on the front.
Little pro tip here, you don't want to do that.
So if you decide you don't want to heed my warning, there are easier ways to get in the house than tampering with the magnetic light. I had a friend.
But just to that point though, I think you have a cardinal rule about your home automation system.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So from an electronic hackable standpoint, the lights could be potentially compromised because they are connected to the LAN. They're behind the firewall and there's no outside access to them. Although Lutron does support it, I have it closed off.
You've never enabled it.
But in theory, somebody technically could compromise the router, and technically could compromise the machine and escalate their access. You could technically.
But the only thing they would get access to is the lights.
Lights. Now everything else is completely offline. The phone line that the security system dials out is, and I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, but suffice to say is it's not just an open wire. And it also has a cellular backup, so even if you could find where the wire was and cut it, you still wouldn't stop it from dialing out.
Yeah.
Everything and the door control system, what I would consider the most critical element, is not connected in any way, shape, or form in any imaginable way to the network. Now, does that mean that I can unlock the doors from afar? Yes, that's what it means. But
so that you are taking that trade-off of remote unlock and lock, which, to be honest with you, it would be a major attraction because somebody could be at the JB1 studio and need to get in there for an appointment, and I'm not there. And if I could open the door remotely, that would be nice.
And here at the office, I have it plugged in. But I have yet to come up with a time when I want somebody that doesn't already have a key to my house in my house without me there. In 7 years, that's never come up.
The alternative is you could also do one of those key cards and make it active for a day and just hide it on the property somewhere.
Yeah, that's what I do. Or like when I'm having people come into the house, I have it active for certain hours during certain days.
Yeah.
So the realtor, their little key box.
So yeah, that's perfect for that. Yeah. So as a Linux user, do you find this sort of frustrating, or do you find it? Oh, okay. Yeah. So has it not been ideal for as a Linux user?
No, it hasn't been ideal. In fact, that's why when the guy wrote in with the feedback about doing what started this entire trip, he wrote in and said, "How can I automate my home using Linux?" If there was ever a human being on the face of the planet that would automate his house with Linux,
it'd be you.
I would be doing it. And if someday I can find a way to do it
reliably,
reliably, I would even, I would even take some compromise.
Well, what about that? What about that device like that Z-Wave we talked about in the picks?
So the problem is, I would start my research tree all over again. How does it interface?
Yeah.
How does it talk?
Right.
How is it tied in? What's the longevity of it?
Yeah.
And the thing is, when you buy into things like Lutron and URC, they're proprietary. They're not open source. And they're not particularly Linux friendly, but they tie into all the other home automation stuff. And the reality is, I always look at it very simple. My hard line in the sand is I won't use stuff that I have to use Windows to consistently use. And you could program the lights. They call it aerobic programming. You can go around and hold the button down on the controller and it'll start flashing and say, set the scene, and then run around and set the lights exactly how you want them, and then push the button again and it'll save that scene, right?
So you could do it manually.
I could technically do it. And so to me, I'm using the software to substitute what I would, and same with the universal remote control. If I absolutely had to, I could manually learn each button.
Yeah. But it sounds like what you've done is like, well, I can use VirtualBox, and about once every 5 years, I got to fire up this VirtualBox. And I got to do a thing. But other than that, you're not really using Windows to manage it.
And I'll tell you, it's so infrequent that the door controller, I have that saved on a separate hard drive. That it's a VirtualBox image that's on a hard drive that I use to program the doors in case I need it. But when we go to do the actual like video portions of this, you'll see that I will have to go find the installer for the lights program. That's the last time I've touched it, was when I put them in.
Speaking of that, we're going to do, and you'll find it if everything goes as planned. Now, it's a little touch and go since we're run around like madmen this weekend, but the plan is to have a separate video embedded in the Linux Action show notes and up on our YouTube channel of the video tour of Noah's house. So if this is piquing your interest and you actually want to see some of this hardware and how it's wired together, we're going to have a video for that hopefully by this weekend, which will go out with the show. It'll be supplemental to this episode. So in the episode, we want to talk about the nitty gritty, actually using it, the technical hardware that Noah's using, the lessons he's learned, and then in the video we'll have in the show notes, you can actually see the stuff.
I go over one more thing too. A question, CM in the chat room asks, what happens if the power goes out?
Yeah, what does?
So electromagnetic locks are incredibly power efficient. They draw something like 100 or 200 milliamps. And so I have a small DC battery, and I know from experience it lasts for about a day and a half, and then the magnetics will fail.
And then your door's unlocked.
Right. So you have a choice. You can do an electronic strike, which is you see in the movies all the time. They hit a button here. And what that is that's it. That's a servo pulling the striker back, and then the door's allowed to swing freely, right? Yeah. So I could do that. The problem is if the power fails on that kind of a lock, it's what we call fail secure. So it fails into the lock state.
Yeah.
With my doors, it fails safe, which is it fails to the open state. Now, if there's a fire in the house and for whatever reason the wire that goes to the request to exit is damaged, but the wire that's energizing the magnets is not damaged, the last thing I would like is for me to not be able to get out of the house.
Sure.
So my locks are set up so that if there's ever a power failure or there's ever a system failure, the doors will default to open. And I'm okay with that because, again, like I said, they're not really there for my protection. So.
Right. Yeah, and also, if you can run it for a day or so off DC, that's probably going to cover most of your outages.
And the other thing is, too, is we have a generator out back. So I have much more things. Like the servers that are in my basement.
Right.
I'm far more concerned about those than I am the doors. So the generator is going to be up and running and backing that stuff up long before we ever get to.
So if you were going to, you're going to be moving into a new place.
Yep.
You're going to have to set some of this stuff up again.
I am.
What is the major takeaway lessons if you're going to rebuild? What would you do differently?
So first thing I'm going to do is I will start my research all over again to see what's on the market because we bought the house in 2007. A lot has changed in the automation market, and I'm going to look at what's there. I won't use anything that requires me to get on the internet. I won't use anything that requires me to activate it. It is entirely possible I will just transplant my current system back.
And it's been working really well.
It has. However, it would be really nice if I could use more open technology or more open source software, hardware-based solutions, that kind of thing. I'd fully be willing to go with that. it's one of those things where I just don't touch the software enough that it really bothers my ethics of using the software.
Because it's almost, for that particular device, it's almost more important that it's an appliance.
And it is. It literally is. I mean, you've seen it. It's a box that screws to the wall and plugs into the power. And the software is again, it's in addition to the programming. You can use the device without the software if you wanted to.
Well, okay, so faster. I just kind of had I know it's been a long time since you actually probably bought all the original gear and stuff. Yeah. Do you have a rough estimate of how much you spent to automate it? I mean, and it's going to be unique for each house and how much stuff they have. But
so the light switches are about $170 each. There are 4 of them in the living room, 4 of them in the entryway, 4 of them in the garage. There are 4 downstairs, 4 in the theater, 3 in the bathroom, 2 in each bedroom. And then 2 in the kitchen.
Did you buy them all at once, or did you piecemeal?
Oh, I pieced them together. Yeah. And the other thing is, too, is I was getting dealer pricing, which helps.
Right, yeah.
So there was a couple thousand. I spent probably $3,000 or $4,000 in light switches, and then the home theater was $10,000 plus easy. I mean, the screen alone was probably $1,500, and the projector at the time was like $5,000 or $6,000. So it was a lot. Now, somebody had asked about what it was like with my wife, right?
Yeah, what's the I think I said, what was the spousal approval factor?
So here was the spousal approval factor. Everything was fine, and first she thought it was really convenient until she went out in her bathrobe to collect the mail or something in the middle of the winter. Let me tell you what not to say when she comes back in and the door has automatically relocked.
Oh my gosh.
Do not ask your wife.
Did you remember your key?
I learned with experience. Do not ask your wife why she didn't take her RFID security credentials with her. When she left the
That's not what she wants to hear.
That was not what she wanted to hear.
Not when it's snowing.
She was rather upset. What was the make of the door system? Made by a company called Carry Doors, and I really like them because they're a smaller outfit, and they actually worked with me to get it to kind of work with the wine when I asked them. It wasn't like I said, it wasn't really I wouldn't actually recommend it because it was such a pain. Yeah. But that also ties into the Cisco SIP system too. So if I dial a specific extension, it will unlock the doors, which is kind of cool.
Oh my gosh, that's neat.
That's another thing that got damaged when we had the water damage, but it's definitely something that'll be going into the new house.
So I got 2 more questions for you, and a couple of them from the chat room. So the first one is, because you mentioned this to me really briefly yesterday when we were touring all of this, and I'm just curious if you want to expand upon it on the show here, is you said maybe one day you could even see yourself powering some of this with solar.
Yeah, so I actually have in my basement like a 4,000 or 5,000 watt inverter. It's a big old thing. And what I wanted to do was, in my bedroom, I power 5 things. I power the television. Yeah. I power my alarm clock. I recharge my cell phone and glass and the light above my head, right? Yeah. And all of those things are used for very brief amounts of time. The light's used for maybe an hour max in the day. TV's used for maybe a couple hours. And then, of course, the alarm clock is powered 24/7. So I started to think, you know what? It wouldn't be that hard to have a battery run an inverter, and I could probably run the entire bedroom off of the inverter. So I quick rigged it up like test-like, just setting the solar panel outside and trying all that, and it worked. I was able to run it, and I thought, that's awesome. And so then I started thinking, here's what I could do. I could build a battery bank, and then I could just start tying one by one, switching breakers over from shore power over to my DC system. The problem I started to have is I started to go down a rabbit hole. And you'll understand when I say this. I started to get to a point where I'm like, well, the light in my bedroom is AC. Why do I need an AC light? Why not put a DC light in? It'll be more efficient. It'll draw less power. I could use LED.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you see where this is going, right?
Totally do.
So then I start to get to, so I bought one of the little ones that are in our campers. Yeah. And I tried it and I'm like, this works really well. And then I had to stop myself and I'm like, Noah, do not rip all of the standard fixtures out of your house and put camper fixtures in, especially since you're considering selling the house. I stopped myself. But I love it. I did go down that thought process, but I do want to switch over time my house over to solar. And now that things like the Tesla battery has come out, I think that solar is just going to take
that Tesla home battery. Yeah. So Jordan asked in the chat room if you're just telling us all about this because you're selling your house. Actually, ironically, I should say, I'll share this part of the story. So, like the week before I'm coming out here, or like 2 days before I'm leaving, or something.
2 days before you left.
Yeah, I was like, this isn't really a big deal, but turns out I'm going to be having my house on the market when you get here. Right. Like, it was totally unplanned. At the time, and now we kind of have to jump around it because people they're showing the house.
Right. Yeah. And at the time we talked about this episode, none of this was in the works. I mean, But the thing is. The thing is that we had some life changes, and so as that happened, we've decided that we need to move into a slightly bigger space, and so we started looking, and all of that has just happened in the last month or so. well after the time that back in April, I think is when we started planning this. So it was well after that, but now that it's there, if you are interested in a house that is entirely wired for home automation, the theater is going to stay. I'm taking the equipment with me, but it's certainly all set up for a theater. It's painted and everything is set up. There's links in the show notes to the listing of the house, and hopefully they're going to get the rest of those pictures updated and you can kind of see it. There's Cat 5 all over the place, Cat 6E in some places. It's wired for SIP and for internet. And the other thing is I have access point placement all over the house.
Yeah, you
because
do.
As I was like, well, I want one here, and I want a guest access point in the guest room, so I had all that stuff planned out. I just never actually got around to doing it.
All right, then the last question, which I think is a pretty good one, it came from J.A. in the chat room. He says, is it 802.11 and Ethernet or custom wireless? He says, I know the remote is IR, but how is the network communicating? Is it RF? What's going on there?
Network to what?
Like how does the controller tell the lights when to turn on? Like
that is RF. That is I believe it's 800 megahertz RF. So the controller it starts at the router, and the controller is tied into the network, and then the controller talks to the lights via RF. The remote talks to its base station via RF, which then talks to the lights via the network. So it's going. So if I hit a command on the remote, it's going RF to its base station, through the Cat 5 through the network to the light controller, back out to RF to the light switch, and then the lights do something. I have yet to find something I can't tie into something else. Like every time I think, my creativity is the limit. Like I thought to myself, I'm like, it'd be really nice if I could open the door from my phone while I'm sitting downstairs. And I look, and sure enough, somebody makes a freaking close contact module that will trip the request to exit to unlock the door by dialing a specific extension. It's made by Viking, actually, if anyone's interested in it. So I got that. And
that is neat.
It's really, really fun when I start thinking, well, maybe if I could set up a thing so that when I open the garage door, it automatically disarms the security system. Because obviously I'm coming in the house. Oh, well, yeah, again, that's just a matter of tying the close contacts there to the security system.
You know, I have a real, like, if you just want to play around with automation and you have a smartphone and you just want real basic, like super basic automation, check out Tasker on Android. Because one of the things I did, and this is super minor, but one of the things I did with Tasker is when I join my Wi-Fi network, it sends a wake on LAN packet to my machine and fires it up.
Yeah.
So by the time I walk to my office, my computer's all ready to go and my machine's all fired up. That's the most automated I get. But you can play with stuff like that using Tasker on Android, because you can say, when you join Wi-Fi and it's this SSID, send this wake on LAN magic packet and stuff like that.
All right, so here's the $1 million question. You ready for this? Now that you've seen it firsthand and kind of seen the experience and then kind of heard me describe it, has your opinion of home automation changed at all?
Yeah, actually I think it has. I think I do like more of the appliance-based approach, because if I was having a bad day and I was really busy and I had to then deal with like a crashing home automation system, I would not be a happy camper.
Right. I completely agree with you, but I got to tell you, in 7 years, I have never once walked into a room where the lights haven't come on. I have never once touched a light switch that hasn't come on. Because remember, the light switches are actually they're actually controlling the lights.
Yeah.
They feel futuristic though. It's it's like a mouse where you click once and it comes onto a predefined scene. You click twice and it goes forward.
Yeah, it is cool. You can 4-tab it as another. You know what I was actually thinking? No, it's funny because this is just how I frame everything right now, because I'm on this road trip, right now, I'm thinking to myself, man, if I automated certain things in the Rover, then I could guarantee I'm not draining down the batteries. Like, I'd be nice to be able to remotely turn off the water pump in the furnace when I'm not using them, so that way I'm not burning through propane, right?
Those contacts, man, that's all
that
switches.
is.
That's all that is.
So that's what, when you're saying that, that's what I was like, I could make the Rover really badass, because that's like actually approachable.
You can make it so when you open the door, it automatically kicks on all those switches, like the hot water and stuff like that.
Oh, that'd be cool.
You can make a pressure pad outside your bed, so when you step outside the bed, it kicks on the hot water and turns it.
That would be a good idea too. Yeah, because it's even when you're living off the grid and you're running off batteries and solar and water tanks. Anything you can do to sort of make sure your own stupidity doesn't hurt you. Like we got lucky, so we showed up here in Grand Forks and. We were exhausted. And so, you got us a hotel room, which was very nice. Thank you. By the way, the way they have that pool set up is sweet. It's like you have a view, even though it's just a pool. It's really cool.
So what did you notice in the lobby? Anything specific in the lobby?
Ubuntu in the lobby. Very nice.
Did you notice that the windows?
Nobody was touching the Windows box.
They just redid this hotel. And so the owner calls me and he goes, I need a really nice kiosk that my guests can use and be really excited. I said, no problem. I'll have it. So we got like a really nice futuristic looking monitor and got an Intel NUC, and it's the kiosk computer. And so we got all that set up and our stock Ubuntu customized setup and put all that in. The Windows computer gets used so infrequently now that it actually falls asleep and just nobody even knows it's there. Like it looks like it's off. In fact, it might be off. I don't even know.
Yeah. So it was great. So we get in the hotel room, right? And we just immediately didn't think about the trailer because we were exhausted. We've been driving for hours and hours and hours. And And I realized that one of the things that we did was we left the brake controller to the truck hooked up, which means it was trickle charging the batteries in the trailer. But the problem was we left a couple of things on.
Yeah.
And if I could have just had the system sense that we weren't in the trailer anymore for like, say, 5 hours had gone by and it turned off, then what could have potentially happened is if I hadn't caught that this morning, say I left the truck like that while we're doing this all day, I might have drained the battery all the way down in the truck.
You should look into this. My Jeep, which is also made by Dodge, has some sort of a system in it where if it detects a certain current draw on a specific fuse after a certain amount of time, it'll kill the power to that fuse.
Really?
And I would almost bet your truck has the same feature.
Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. But it got me thinking about automation, and it got me thinking about like, oh, this is now that I'm living in a machine that has limited resource, limited propane, limited water, limited battery power. And that battery power has to not only power all my lights and all of my stuff and all my other niceties, but it also has to power all my work gear too.
Right.
So it's super critical that I don't mess that up. And there I could see some serious potential. So I have changed my mind a little bit. I think what I'll probably do is research along with you while you're setting up for the new place and kind of see what works. I love the idea of doing it on one of those Raspberry Pi based devices, but we'll see.
And if you find a way to automate 12 volt DC, man, I'll be right there with you.
Yeah.
So,
well, maybe people could let us know. In fact, if you want to get in hold of me specifically for something about the Roadshow, email me, rover@jupiterbroadcasting.com. That's where I'm taking Roadshow and trailer specific info and feedback. And I've been getting some awesome emails, some really geeky stuff out there that guys are suggesting to me that I really appreciate. So if you got any ideas on how I could do this, and open source would be my preference, rover@jupiterbroadcasting.com would be where to send that. No, anything else you want to touch on?
I think we pretty much got it.
All right, if you guys have any questions, send them into the show, linuxactionshow@jupiterbroadcasting.com. And don't forget, we can always use more suggestions for different technology. You can submit those to the subreddit, linuxactionshow.reddit.com. And if anybody's ever gotten Linux MCE working to actually automate their home, not to dog on the project, but both Noah and I tried it and just came up bus. But if you've got Linux MCE automating your home, I'd like to hear it, linuxactionshow.reddit.com, and maybe even a video of it if you're bold enough. All right, that's the Linux Action Show's look at Noah's automated home from the future. And that brings us to the end of this week's show. And we got a couple of emails to get into. Also, just I'll mention it. If you want to check out Noah's listing, or I doubt there's probably anybody listening in the Grand Forks area that wants to buy a home right now. But if you know a family member or friend who might, send them a link, and that'd be great. So I am going to read Ben G's email about DMX lighting. How appropriate. He said, I saw an episode earlier this year that involved QLC Plus and DMX lighting. I'm in a position where I can save someone a lot of effort and money on a new DMX lighting setup after converting them to a Linux user, by the way. However, I'm not familiar enough with DMX lighting to go in and get this done. I wanted to control 12 lights with QLC Plus with Linux-compatible hardware. What would I need? What I am looking at is a DMX 512 board. It seems like they only have one input, even if they have 16 or so channels. So, can you guys help? Noah, before we answer that, what the hell is QLC Plus and what the hell is DMX?
QLC Plus is a program that controls lights on the DMX protocol. DMX is a protocol that's used to control lights. Now, we actually did an episode on QLC Plus and DMX.
The party mode episode.
Right, yeah, a little earlier, and we did a lot of fancy stuff. And, of course, that's all being done with Linux. Now, I actually use a controller. You can get it for $37 on Amazon. It's called the RioRand UXB to DMX interface adapter, and it's available for $37, and it's Prime eligible. Now, DMX is channel-based. So if I assign, I can assign, and it's all, if you're familiar with IP addresses, it's very much the same in that we start at 1 and we end at 255. If I assign a channel of 1, I can assign a value of either 1 to 255. So channel 1 can have a value of 255, which means on all the way, or it can have a value of 0, which is off completely.
So then you can send individual lighting levels to that specific channel.
Groups of lights too. Okay. So let's say I had like 5 of them on one wall. I can put them all to channel like 3 and tell them all to go to 60 and then all to go to off and then all to go to 60 and all that kind of thing. And then you can set up so that I can have groups of channels and do different things. Yeah. You only need one port because they're all chained together. So every DMX lighting device has an in and an out. So if I go, from the USB controller, I will plug a DMX cable out of my laptop into the first light and then to the second, to the third, and to the fourth. And because they're individually channeled, it doesn't matter which order they're plugged into.
Because they each have their own address channel,
usually,
essentially.
Exactly. Now, usually what we'll do is we'll have them all addressed ahead of time, and then we will hang them up and just cable as it makes sense. But you don't have to do it that way. But to get started, $37, and of course, QLC Plus is free, and you'll be able to do that on any modern Linux distro, although we've had the best luck on Ubuntu 12.04.
There you go, 12.04. All right, you want to take James B's
James B
email.
writes in with a huge thank you to the Linux Action Show and the crew. I wrote in a few days ago thanking Chris and the team for helping me inspire to get into Linux, and it led to my first interview for Linux job. I'm writing you now back to tell you that I got the job, and that mentioning I listened to the show in the interview definitely helped. If you all want a previous letter of testimonial or adverts or whatever, please feel free to use me. The work you do has changed my life and all of my family for the better. I will definitely be signing up as a Patreon soon.
That's amazing.
Love you guys. Yeah, and
that's at patreon.com/today. We could use some support.
And I think that's a really good example of the content that you hear here on the Linux Action Show and the resources that we point you to, things like DigitalOcean, things like Linux Academy. Those are resources that if you use them will get you far in the workplace. And they're things that, both you and I have worked in that IT spectrum, so we know the things that are valuable, and you're very picky of those people that you bring onto the network.
Exactly.
So if you put your name behind it, you can trust that that's probably something that's really going to be beneficial to you.
I want to talk about James's point about listening to the podcast in his interview, and I wouldn't imagine it's not just the Linux Action Show that would probably have helped him. I think as somebody who's has done many interviews to hire technical people. One of the things I try to suss out in those interviews, and I haven't done this for a couple of years, but one of the things I would try to do, and I'm betting you do the same thing.
Are they a geek or are they looking for money?
Are they doing this because it's a lifestyle, or are they looking to make money at a job? And if they're doing it because they love it and they're passionate and it's a lifestyle, then that means that they have a natural inclination to go learn more on their own. And as an employer, that means they're going to be a real valuable asset to me. And one of the ways I can suss that out in a 30-minute interview is if they tell me about some of the things they do on the side that are technology related. Listening to a really geeky technology podcast, being dedicated like that would definitely be a good check in my box too if I'm trying to interview somebody. And if it's a sysadmin position and they're listening to the Linux Action Show, you're damn right I would think that's a really good thing. I think it's totally legit because it demonstrates to the employer that this is actually really a passion thing for you and that it's likely something that you're going to stick at.
The folks at Red Hat, when we interviewed them, said that one of the biggest things they ask is when they say, well, tell me about why you care about open source involvement. If the next words out of your mouth are all the places that you've been paid to do open source work, that just doesn't hang as well as all the stuff that you volunteered in the community to do. If you say, these are my pet projects that I'm going to do with or without a paycheck, he said, if that's how they treat a project when they don't have a paycheck, just imagine what they can do if I give them some money.
Exactly. And so that's James. That's great. And James, thank you also for taking the time to send that feedback in because it's that kind of feedback that really does kind of inspire us to keep going. So I really appreciate that. You can go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com/contact. Also, patreon.com/today if you'd like to support any of the shows. Yeah, it's a Tech Talk Today page, but the funding there goes to pay the back-end production staff and things like that affect and improve all of the shows. So thank you very much, James. That means a lot to us. Noah, is there anything else we want to cover in this week's episode?
I don't think so. Thanks for coming all the way from Seattle, Washington, breaking your truck to make it here a day early, nonetheless, and putting up with the fact that you can't really be at my house for different hours of the day that we can't even really identify.
Not only did we, so those of you who haven't been watching the rover log updates that I've been posting on YouTube, my truck blew up on me as I was leaving town. And I actually thought it was the end of the road trip. And we lost a day because of that. So not only did we lose a day, but we managed to make that day up and make it here a day early, which was really, really great because that gave me the time to work on some of our other shows too.
Actually, in retrospect, I don't know how we would have pulled this off and not having been there. Because we had so many little things to sort out. Yeah. If we hadn't gotten started, I think we had ended up punting a show.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why, Wednesday. We drove for like 16 hours total. It was just a marathon.
We got here to give you guys an idea.
It was like 12, I think.
To give you guys an idea of what happens behind the camera. We got here at 9 a.m. We have not left.
No, it's 5 now.
we have been here the entire time. And then when we're done, we're going to go pack up a bunch of video gear. Yeah. And we're going to go film for another 4 hours. Yeah.
I know.
So it's crazy.
Woo. That's how we like to party around here at the Linux Action Show. All right, if you'd like to submit some content, linuxactionshow.reddit.com. That's also a place to go for the feedback thread and a great spot to just get our attention over there. You can send us an email directly. Go to jupiterbroadcasting.com/contact. I'll give one more plug to track the road trip in real time, jupiterbroadcasting.com/rover. You can follow Noah on Twitter. He is at Colonel Linux. I am at Chris LAS. You can follow the network at Jupiter Signal. Those are all good resources, those Twitter accounts. Even if you're not a Twitter user, you can get updates about what's going on. So if If you want to know where a show's at or what we're doing, you can go look at those Twitter feeds, being a Twitter user or not. And that's nice. Also, you can follow the network on all the fantastic places like Google Plus and Facebook, etc., and on YouTube as well. I don't ever really mention those very often, but we do have some YouTube-specific things that aren't currently on the site, but will probably be on the site later. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for tuning this week's episode of the Linux Action Show, and we'll see you right back here next week. So a couple of kind of funny things. You know, when you plan a road trip and you bring a RV trailer, you kind of don't bring other things that you normally would bring on a road trip, like bags and suitcases and stuff, because all your things are in this trailer, and so you don't need to take that anywhere. So why bring a suitcase, right? Why bring a suitcase if you're traveling on a road trip and you're taking your trailer and everything you are bringing with you is in that trailer? Well, because when you get to Grand Forks, Noah is nice enough to put you up in a hotel, and then, like an animal, you got to carry everything in from your trailer hand by hand, 3 or 4 trips. And then, so this morning I'm taking a shower, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, so I don't have any deodorant or toothpaste, and my hairbrush is out in the trailer. Okay, I got to go back out to the trailer. And then I get, out there, I'm like, oh yeah, I got to get clothes, too. And then, I had to come here to the studio, and like a monster, I'm carrying 2 laptops and 2 power bricks, so my hands are full with just computer stuff, because I didn't bring my computer bag, because why would I bring a computer bag? I'm not taking my computer anywhere but in the trailer. Yeah, so lesson learned on that one. I don't know what I was thinking. So I am using a grocery bag right now to carry the laptops.